All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Comic-Con 2021, our second annual virtual Comic-Con panel for all things Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth, Hobbit, and boy, is there so much going on in the world of Middle-earth, and there's so much to talk about. We are the OneRing.net. We've been doing this for 20 years. I think our first panel was 1999. So we've been doing a bunch of panels, and this is kind of the third wave of Tolkien fandom, I guess you could say, because if the first wave was animation and Ralph Bakshi and the Hobbit cartoons, and second wave of Peter Jackson's universe, and now Amazon is entering the fray. So we've got a lot to talk about. A little bit about the OneRing.net. We are the largest active Tolkien forum. We've got 500,000 fellow ringers across all of our socials. We're talking to 4 million of them per month, according to our social media stats, if that matters. But it doesn't matter to us because we don't have any ads on our website. We've never monetized. This is the OneRing.net is all volunteer. We've never made any money on this. We've put it all back into the servers, which melt down constantly. And if we have any left over, we've donated to book charities. Today, I'm joined by an awesome panel of people. First up is our longtime contributor, writer of People's Guide to Middle-earth, and producer, writer of Ringers, Lord of the Fans, Cliff Broadway. Next to him is Josh Long, who is our collectibles editor, who reviews almost everything that comes across our desks, whether it's a Sideshow collectible or a Weta Workshop collectible, or most recently, Lord of the Rings rubber duckies. Josh, you got to review rubber duckies for the OneRing.net. I know that was a high watermark. Jim Wirt is our Atlanta correspondent. He is a regular contributor to the OneRing.net, and he helps organize a lot of our East Coast event, especially Dragon Con, which is going to be virtual this year. I believe we have a few panels. There's going to be big fantasy track, including everything Lord of the Rings, and then we've got a new guest with us this year. Molly Ostertag is an award-winning writer, graphic novelist, animation pioneer, and she just had a book put out, The Girl from the Sea, which you guys should pick up. And she created a pandemic Twitter account called @HobbitGay, which is the #1 source of Shire-like joy and art. Thank you. Welcome, everybody.
It's so good to be here.
Well, let's get into it. We've got a lot to talk about. First up, we've got some Tolkien books, multiple books coming to shelves this year. We've got new Lord of the Rings movies. What's that about? Amazon's TV show, which we've been patiently waiting for the last 3 years. New Lord of the Rings video games, and of course, fans. Where do they fit into all this? Jim, what is this coming out?
Yeah, so it's the latest edited version, obviously not by Christopher Tolkien, but edited by, gosh, what's his name? You can see
Carl Hostetter, right?
Carl Hostetter.
That's Carl.
Yeah, so but it's a collection of unreleased material. What we're being told is that it may answer a lot of interesting and unanswered questions. Things like the nature of the Valar and how Numenor and Gondar are connected. It even says maybe we'll find out who can grow beards and who can't as part of the Middle-earth legendarium. So it will be new content, which we're all very excited about. Notes and essays, as it says here, all written by the professor and edited together. So pretty exciting. I just saw that not only is this particular version available, but they're releasing one of their classic deluxe box sets versions of this as well. So you can go to Waterstone or I guess Amazon UK and look for an upgraded version of this particular book.
Now, I understand that this new book of writings from J.R.R. Tolkien is mostly unpublished stuff that Christopher, who died last year just before the pandemic of old age, he intentionally collected and saved and handed off to Carl Hostetter and said, this is meant to be the final word from the professor himself. on the rules of Middle Earth. Is that correct?
We'll see. Tolkien wrote so many things in such a jumble. You know, I think it's conceivable that there could be later editions of unpublished stuff that is still out there, but at least for now, this is what we're getting. So it could be cool.
Cliff, this is I believe this is the synopsis from the publisher themselves, right?
Yes. The intriguing thing about this, honestly, and I think that Jim mentioned it, is that it's the first time that somebody else is taking their hand to editing these old manuscripts that have not seen the light of day, that is not really Christopher Tolkien. This is new. This is very, very new. So to be honest to the audience, we might be a little bit more in the dark about the process and about how it all got put together. But nonetheless, it seems really, really promising that we're going to learn some things that we have not learned before. And of course, as complicated as an individual as Professor Tolkien was, he rewrote things and constantly revisited a lot of the material. And sometimes it was not finished to his satisfaction. And as we know from reading the History of Middle-earth books, Christopher Tolkien was an expert at showing us this was draft A versus something dated a year later, draft B, and then we can see how my father's ideas were changing about the whole story. So I really am intrigued. This book is an absolute must-have, at least to solve the mysteries that we don't yet know are within it.
Molly, as a television writer and author, does the idea of Tolkien giving the more rules and regulations and thoughts on where to take Middle Earth, does that intrigue you?
It's so fascinating. He is one of the only authors where I am really interested in that stuff and in all of the canon, because it feels so much like it is this real world that we're getting a transcribed history of. And so I find it really delightful. I love how much thought he puts into, like, this specifically says like the flora and fauna. I love how much thought he puts into like the landscape and the world, which I think is actually what the next book is about too. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always, I mean, not that I'm like a writer on the show or anything, but I assume that it is always like material to kind of pull from and just like more information rather than imposing rules.
That's awesome.
It's fun to have those I's dotted and T's crossed on just background stuff, because I think that feeling like real history is where those I's get dotted and T's.
And that is what's so fun about like making work in Middle Earth, I think, is that there is an answer to everything you could want there to be. Pretty fun.
You're right, Molly. There's more detail in Professor Tolkien's world than anybody else's fantasy world building, by far. And yes, that is a hill I'm going to stand on and plant my flag on, and I will die on that hill.
Definitely a singular author.
Exactly. I mean, he invented in his lifetime how many Khan languages, constructed original languages? Last count, some academics say that Tolkien invented up to 16 or 17 original languages, including structures, many of them with original lettering systems and alphabet systems, all original. And this book is going to really help us get closer to that brilliant mind who bothered to check the phases of the moon when Thorin and company were going across the wilderness. This is the mind we're talking about with Tolkien. So I'm very excited about what is within the pages of this book. I really am.
Now, what is it true that Tolkien intended other people to expand on the mythology of Middle Earth?
Originally, and this is a famous letter that he published. He originally thought as a young man that it would be, as a younger writer, that it would be a great sandbox for other people to take their hands to working and playing with music and artistry and paint, as he said in that letter. But then he mitigated himself in that letter and said, absurd. That was such a possibly overreaching, maybe over-ambitious idea. And to correct the record, I think that maybe a couple of decades later, he must have realized after the success of The Lord of the Rings in the counterculture of America, with the audience expanding around the world buying his books, I think maybe he realized that his earliest younger ambition maybe was not as absurd after all.
Well, certainly one thing that he came to realize was, even if he allowed for the opportunity, the possibility that others could play in his sandbox, he had very strong points of view about who he did not want playing in his sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
So the Disney world, for example, the possibility of converting his vision of elves or of dwarves into a Disneyfied version was horrifying. Do
you anywhere close? Well, Jim, let me ask you this then. Based on the official synopsis from HarperCollins, the publisher, do you think this book is the Tolkien family and the Tolkien estate and J.R.R. Tolkien himself bridging the void into what Amazon will be making?
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if it'll be a bridge or it'll just be a supplement. And a lot of that, as we said earlier, has to do with what Christopher Tolkien left unpublished, how the editor is going to approach the content. So it may be interesting and anecdotal and additive. I don't know. It would be surprising to me if it was revolutionary in its revelations, because honestly, Christopher Tolkien did such a phenomenal job at unpacking his father's legacy and in helping us to work through this jumble of content that he was so studious at stewarding on our behalf. So we have so much already. It will at least be, I'm looking forward to it to be supplemental and maybe answering some of these odd questions that fans tend to kick around and in a good-natured way fight about from time to time.
I was going to say real quick is I think one of the things that's great about with these types of books from Tolkien and his letters and stuff is I think it cuts down a bit of where sometimes people, and we've seen this on Twitter and the interwebs and stuff, and that people want to kind of put their voice into Tolkien in a way that's like, well, it has to be this way because I feel like it's this way. And he does a good job with his letters and the stuff that he left behind and saying, no, this is exactly what I meant. And the more of this information comes out, those pictures get clearer and clearer. And then that way, if people want to get upset because interpretations of Tolkien are out there from different people and it cuts down on, where they don't have the room to get upset because it's clearly, this is what he said, this is what he meant. And if you want to get upset about it, well, then it becomes your own business. But he's clearly laid out, this is what he meant. And I think that that's a good thing because then it allows people to have fun in the world because they have, things that they can play by, and then the others want to get upset, they can get upset.
True. Moving on. The World of J.R.R. Tolkien is a book by John Garth, who was part of our Comic-Con 2020 panel last year. It is one of the best books about Tolkien and his real life inspirations. Everything from a town council meeting where Tolkien went back and there's obvious connection between certain scenes and characters in the Shire and what he had just experienced at a town council meeting. This book is all about the worlds of Tolkien, the world that he lived in himself. And it's interesting from the perspective of reading this, you start to see that Tolkien did not just create out of whole cloth the entire Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth Legendarium, but he took experiences and he brought it into his storytelling in his own unique way. So this book I highly recommend because it doesn't necessarily break down the myth of the ultimate creator, creating from whole cloth, but it just shows you that this was a real man living in the real world and including some of his real life stories into his narratives. But we had a big announcement last month. Cliff, I believe you got a middle of the night text message about this.
I did. Royd Tolkien, who is a dear friend of the worldwide community of fans, and us as well at the One Ring, Roy Tolkien had such an extraordinary story to tell about his brother, Mike Tolkien. And let's just say that ALS is just such a horrible, horrible thing. And everyone probably remembers the ice water bucket challenge that people did around the world as a viral internet phenomenon to raise awareness and to raise money for ALS research, what was previously known as Lou Gehrig's disease. For those who are, fans of Stephen Hawking, famous astrophysicist, you will also realize that ALS was something that affected Roy Tolkien's brother, Mike. And before Mike passed away, he asked his brother, in a great spirit of adventure, to actively participate in this wonderful list, a bucket list of activities and physical challenges and wild tricks and traps and wonderful things around the world to go and see and experience, and left that list entirely for Roy Tolkien to take on, and he did. And when Mike was still alive, I was actually visiting in New Zealand at the time. We had a wonderful afternoon with Bruce Hopkins, who plays Gamling in Rohan in the Two Towers. And Bruce Hopkins and Roy and Mike and myself, we were, visiting the black sand beaches further to the west of Auckland. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful day. And my heart is heavy with the loss of my own brother in the past year, and it helps me reflect on how Roy is telling this story. A completely beautiful and compassionate story about a man who had ideas of life and how great it is to be directly involved in life itself. And on behalf of his brother, Roy traveled the world and shot a beautiful documentary film. And now, with this recent announcement, we realized that Amazon also asked him to sit down for a year and write his own story. Now, there's a book as well as this feature film that is going to be released. It's called There's a Hole in My Bucket, and I'm really emotional about this, and it's really beautiful, beautiful stuff. I'm excited because I thought there was only going to be one feature documentary. And now I realize that Roy has been so busy telling a much more intimate and personal story. And now the book is going to be released early August. I'm very, very thrilled about this. And yet I'm also just kind of choked up about it too, because I knew him and he was such a beautiful, beautiful soul. And to see that love between two brothers reflected so strongly with Roy doing this as a tribute, a lasting tribute for his brother. And it will last so many, many, many years into the future, as a reminder to us all about the bond of love and friendship and support that is irreplaceable between brothers and sisters, of course. So I'm really excited about this, really.
Together we're doing the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, and the reason why we're doing this is because Mike has got ALS.
He was always incredibly active and a real adrenaline junkie, which is completely opposite to me, and I was the... Stop a second. Oh. Sorry. Mate, don't, you'll set me off.
My sister-in-law died a couple of years ago.
Of motor neuron disease? Oh.
I'm sorry, I'm really sorry to hear
that. No, it's all right. I'm trying to keep it together.
That's what Mike wanted me to do. Make a complete arse of myself at the most awkward moment possible.
He's always wanted to go to New Zealand and do all that crazy shit, you know, jumping off bridges and all that kind of stuff. I'm a b***y if I get a sniffle.
Oh God. Oh, it's so cold.
I'm facing my fears by doing this stuff.
Oh, there's more.
Because he's facing his all the time. It's not like Mike is here now, because Mike's here.
So that's coming out this year.
Mhm.
It's an Amazon exclusive, and this will be the third Amazon acquisition that's related to the Tolkien family.
Indeed. Indeed it is. When you stop and think about it, yes. Yeah.
So this is Amazon basically saying, you know, they didn't just license Lord of the Rings to exploit it. I mean, they're really supporting the family in very personal projects as well.
Indeed. Yeah.
So, yeah, looking forward to this. But there was another huge announcement last month that basically broke the internet.
You could call this a seismic announcement, actually, really, about the War of the Rohirrim. I mean, Molly, we were talking about this at a really heightened level of excitement about the ideas that you are propagating and thinking up, all these great percolating ideas, and then reaching out, you know, very playfully online saying, hey, who do we have to meet with? You know, whose toes do you need to suck in this town to get a gig playing at the Hollywood Bowl, as, you know, the old joke goes. It's like, you know, and then right after we talked about it,
they heard us talking on the OneRing.net show, and they heard us saying how well Middle Earth meets animation, and they just went out and did it the next day. It's crazy. So I can.
Well, is this influence? Is this actual influence? We always hear that term influencer.
No, I'm joking. I'm sure they've been developed.
Yeah.
No, but I am genuinely so excited for this because I work in animation and I love it as a medium. And I love some Lord of the Rings animated films and parts of others. And I think it just, like, I love that it is getting the anime treatment especially. So it's called The War of the Rohirrim. It is focused on a past king of Rohan, Helm Hammerhand, and it's going to be an anime, and it's going to be 2D animated, which again is really exciting to me because a lot of like Western movies at this point are 3D animated, which I love, but 2D has this like beautiful tactile feel that I really think will really like marry itself to Middle Earth. So it's being produced by Jason DeMarco, who's from Adult Swim. Philippa Boyens, who is one half of the writing pair of the Lord of the Rings movies, is consulting on the lore. I guess it's got some writers from Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, the Netflix show.
Yay!
Yeah,
Yay!
it's a gorgeous show, and yeah, and it's the director of the Ghost in the Shell. What's his name again?
Here, I have it. It's Shinji Aramaki.
Okay, cool. That is a gorgeous like movie, and like also very different genre, but very recommended. And so,
well,
yeah.
I just found out something extra when I looked on Wikipedia. I didn't realize this, but the director of War of the Rohirrim is also dipping his toes into another internet, big intellectual property, which is Blade Runner. He's doing an anime series based in the Blade Runner universe. also for the Adult Swim people. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Mm.
Yeah, and so
Which Warner
I'm so excited about this. Could you guys, I don't really know the story of Helm Hammerhand, so could I get like a little brief about it?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
This is, it's good that this is Adult Swim. This is a pretty dark overall story.
All kids out of the pool.
Right.
Out of the pool, kids.
Well, that's why they call it Adult Swim.
Exactly. Exactly.
If you want to go and read any of the lore, there's not a lot. And the best place to go is in the appendix to your Lord of the Rings, Appendix A in Section 2, is all about the Rohirrim and their history and so on. And really, other than the first king, J.R.R., Helm Hammerhand is the one that gets talked about the most. And the story is really quite dark. It is at an era where Rohan has been established. They're an ally of Gondor. And then a combination of plague, of attack by forces from the east and Dunlingans to the west and corsairs of Umbar all sort of converge on the country. Meanwhile, there's a side story about a wedding and a warlord to the west of Rohan, and he wants to force Helm Hammerhand into marrying off his daughter, and he's not, and Helm is not having it. The reason he gets his name is because he can kill a guy with one blow, which he does to this particular king. And his son named Wolf, interestingly enough, goes dashing off, later comes and attacks Rohan with all these other folks and takes over Medjuseld and kills off Helm Hammerhand's firstborn son. And meanwhile, Helm retreats into the Hornburg, which then takes up his name as Helm's Deep. And he becomes this sort of mythic, frightening character who goes off by his own and kills people with his bare hands. And when he runs out of food, he apparently eats people. And he finally, the whole story wraps up with him dying and freezing in place in battle position. And then his ghost sort of continues to be heard blowing his great horn of Helm throughout the Hornburg and throughout the whole area in Rohan. So that's the kind of dark, mythic, very Game of Thrones-ish almost kind of a story if you remove all of the brothels. And that's the kind of story that they're taking on.
Wow.
Does this Molly, does this lend itself to animation then?
I think so. I mean, it makes me think of like one of my favorite films of all time is Princess Mononoke, which is this, there's a lot of blood. He shoots a guy's head off his neck and like the head goes flying. Like there's like really interesting and intense gore, but I'm not someone who I don't love gore in films, but when it is animated, there's like this level of artistry to it that I think can really elevate it kind of. So no, I think it sounds amazing. I'm hoping that Helm's daughter has like a cool role. I'm hoping for some shield maidens. Yeah. Does that story have any, so besides him kind of becoming a ghost, is there anything of the more like magical parts of Middle Earth, or is it really more of like a historical story?
It really is more of an historical story. It's interesting. One of the contemporaries, and it could be injected into it. Helm dies.
Spoiler.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Spoiler.
Oh, it was published in 1955.
Yeah.
The Return of the King came out in 1956. Wait.
So Helm dies. Ultimately, Wolf, who has taken over the country, is defeated by Helm's nephew, and almost simultaneously, Saruman is given the keys to Orthanc. So that's the contemporary thing that's going on and a touch point for what we know about in the story of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Now, Cliff, can you also place this story with Gandalf and Gollum? Where are they at?
Well, no. At this point, Gollum is hiding, in the Misty Mountains, and he's not going to be seen for centuries until Bilbo accidentally bumps into him. And in terms of where Gandalf might be wandering around, there's no mention, not a single mention. I'm really glad that Jim totally went straight to the Saruman button, because we talked about this, I think, on our live stream, did we not, Molly? That, you know, maybe one of the very best epilogues or post-credit sequence at the end of the War of the Rohirrim could be, hey, here's Saruman walking in and, you know, being, you know, sweet talking, you know, the steward of Gondor and the new king of Rohan, and he gets his keys to Orthanc.
Cool.
Yeah.
That would be a really, that would be, because I mean, I'm really just, I'm a very big fan of adaptations that just do their own thing and don't feel the need to like wink at the other things that exist in the world. But it's, I would love to see Saruman like kind of before he is like so recognizably evil, when he maybe is a more sympathetic character.
I love that. I love it too. But to your question, Justin, no, I would not expect to see Gandalf anywhere at all. And if he did, it might just be something of a stretch for the writers to find a way to interject him into the story. Really.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
It'll be a little bit like Legolas in The Hobbit. He's definitely around. We don't know where he is. The writers certainly write him in. The whole story takes place about 250, 260 years before the events of The Lord of the Rings. So a little less than 200 years before the events of The Hobbit. Pretty soon after the Helm story is when Smaug takes over Erebor. And so you're starting to get within range of some of these stories, and certainly wizard kinds of characters. And you could presumably see some elves if you wanted to.
I do want to see anime elves really badly.
Oh yeah.
Josh, do you think there's an opportunity to make some anime influenced figures finally in Lord of the Rings?
Gentle Giant, oh gosh, 15 years ago maybe, did some animated Lord of the Rings characters, because they did some Star Wars ones too. They didn't go over terribly well, but I think that has more to do with Gentle Giant's marketing at the time of Lord of the Rings stuff versus maybe the popularity, because I know anime collectibles are popular. I know there is a sect of people that collect it. That's what they love. And they may also love Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Middle Earth. And so, yeah, I think depending on who's making them, what's the quality of them, and those kinds of things, yeah, there is a possibility to have people want those. But there's just a lot of factors, like, like I said, who's making them, how many of them are getting made, and what's the cost. And if you hit those markers, yeah, I think there's people that will buy them and put them in there because maybe their collection is more anime centered and it fits within what they have. So it just kind of, I think there's a chance there, but like I said, there's a lot of factors on what might cause that to be a success. But sure, yeah, there's a possibility.
Here's the name. The namesake collectible that could come would be the Hammer of Helm Hammerhand, and that would be intriguing. And we saw that in the statue in the Lord of the Rings. The irony there for all of the book purists is they'll come out of the woodwork and say Helm did not have a hammer. He was known for fighting without weapons, and it was said could not be killed as long as he buy a weapon, as long as he didn't use a weapon. So there'll be more great fan debates over this.
Well, speaking of fan debates, the number one fan debate on the internet 2020, besides everything else that fans debate, has been all of the little tiny drip drops of information from Amazon's Lord of the Rings series. Just real quick, this has been in the works for years. Amazon paid the Tolkien family $250 million with, they're putting at least $1 billion behind the show. 3 seasons are already greenlit. They have options up to 5 seasons on this main series plus spin-offs, and it is being produced in New Zealand, and they've been in New Zealand all during quarantine. The current status of the show is that they started filming 2 months before the pandemic started. And then the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And the actors and the producers all had a decision to make. Do they stay together or do they go home? everybody stayed in New Zealand. So the acting and producing team have been in New Zealand, away from families, away from everybody that they know, for the entire quarantine. And they've been starting, stopping production as COVID flare-ups happen. So this has been a real test of production skills and acting capabilities, and being able to perform under such circumstances and perform in a totally not modern, story. So, my kudos to everybody on the production for sticking with it. And I just know that the relationships formed because of all of this. We're going to see some relationships that show up on screen that you can just see the camaraderie. Currently, the pilot is being reshot. Some scenes didn't work, so they recasted some of the actors and characters. They're currently in reshoots. Those are scheduled to be going through August. There are 3 directors for season 1. J.A. Bayona is doing the first 2 episodes. He's responsible for the pilot. So he's basically determined the look and feel of the entire series. And as such, he has been given the credit of executive producer for the entire series. Like, this is, and if you've watched any of his other works, which we highly recommend, you can definitely get a sense of how dark this show is going to be. Amazon has also announced Wayne Chi Yip and Charlotte Brandstrom, 2 European directors that are directing the remaining episodes of the first season. They have worked on other Amazon shows, including Wheel of Time. So these are, Amazon is very happy with their work on their other fantasy series. So season 1 should be wrapping up. And I think, and I think it's well known by now that the show is not going to debut until next year, until 2022. So we're looking at least spring or summer 2022. And according to all the contracts that we've seen, the final episode has to be on the air by October 2022. So I'd say the latest this show debuts is July or August of next year. So there's a chance that next year Comic-Con, it will be in person. It'll be in July. They're going to have a huge kickoff for Lord of the Rings. There's a chance that Lord of the Rings may dominate next year's Comic-Con like no other series.
Well, yeah, one can always hope. One can always hope. Yes.
You heard it here first, folks.
Okay.
I'm just putting that out in the world. Now, who is in this show? Cliff, you're friends with Ian McKellen. He has said that he wanted to be on the show. Do we think he's going to be in the show?
No, he's on stage. He's on stage in London with the newly reopened theaters.
Yeah, he's playing, right?
Yeah, he's busy. He's busy doing what he loves more than anything, working on the boards, doing Shakespeare. So no, I don't anticipate Gandalf or Ian McKellen to come anywhere near this project at Amazon Prime, at least not in the first season. Boy, wouldn't it be a nice surprise if they had a second season shocker, hey, here's Gandalf. But
the rumors are that there are wizards in the Second Age.
Yes, there are, because Professor Tolkien wrote something and then he revisited the idea about blue wizards and he wrote something else later in his life. So yeah, there is a possibility of blue wizards. I know that Jim and others probably can chime in on this, but the concept of 2 blue wizards being LOTR and Palando, well, they eventually evolved in Professor Tolkien's mind to become Romestamo and Morhennitar. Is that right, Jim?
I thought they evolved into moths, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, yes.
That's right.
That explains Gandalf on top of Isengard.
That's it.
Yes.
So we've heard many random fan castings and rumor mills. The strongest rumors we've heard, and again, this is unconfirmed, is the 2 blue wizards will be played by 2 of the most respected actors from that region, from other regions of the world, Ken Watanabe and Ghassan Massoud, who you will recognize from many, many movies. But that's just rumor. What we do know is that the current cast looks like this. These are some of their headshots and their names. The thing is that the Amazon has not told us anything about who they're playing. They haven't told us if these are like day players or bit parts, or one episode guest appearance, or a season regular, or a series regular. So we don't know who any of these people are. But some of these people have had extraordinary performances in other beloved shows. I don't know if any of you recognize any of these faces, but Peter Mulan, down at the bottom right there, he was the billionaire dad in Westworld, the HBO series, and had an amazing turn there. And then I think a couple of you had to express excitement over Lenny Henry joining the show.
Knight. Wow.
That would be Sir Lenny Henry. Yes.
So we've had.
I think the thing that
go ahead.
A minute ago, Justin, that I find is the strangest part of seeing all these faces and everything is just not knowing who anybody is. It's I mean, normally shows and movies, it comes out at some point relatively after they're announced, like who they're playing and whether or not it's Warner Brothers, or if it's New Line, or if it's Universal, or whoever. This person's playing this part, this person's playing this part, and it gets out. The fact that we know so little about who these people are playing is, I guess, a testament to the ability of Amazon to keep it a secret, but also in some ways frustrating from a fan point of view, because I'm excited because I love the topic we're talking about, but it's hard to get as excited as I would like to get, because I don't know who's playing any of these parts. I can't go and reread certain bits maybe that I've forgotten or whatever, and go, oh yeah, okay, I can see them, and I can start picturing them in my head playing these parts or doing certain actions from the book, and kind of start to create something in my head. So it's wonderful to see their faces and everything, but at the same time, it's like, cool story. I don't know who you're playing.
Yeah. And it's really, I think it's like really, really wonderful to see like a more diverse cast and to see people of color in Middle Earth. But I'm also like, you better be having these people as the main cast and not as like a single, background character like sorry, my cat, like they had in the Hobbit movies. And so just like a lot of hope that they both like are like bringing diversity to Middle Earth, and also actually like giving people like the meaty good roles that they deserve.
Part of that.
I mean, that
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, that's the whole dialogue of movies this summer. I mean, most recently in The Heights, right? It was just like, this is a beautiful looking cast, but if you relegate them to a background extra that we get one line from, then like there's no point in getting excited about. So, I do
don't want to give credit before we actually know how their characters will be treated. But that being said, it is just like refreshing, I think, to be someone who loves Lord of the Rings, but that is like one of my biggest issues with the film adaptations, is just wanting to see more different kinds of people.
Part of the issue, the challenge is that we don't have, unlike the Lord of the Rings, we don't have any stories. There's basically one story in the Second Age that we get in Unfinished Tales. So the field is wide open for the writers to do whatever they would like with the tent poles of various events and major characters. So the one named character that we have is Galadriel. We know who's cast as Galadriel, and that's appropriate because Galadriel's around and has a role to play in the Second Age. Pretty strong idea that Sauron in his form of Anatar is in here somewhere. Probably some of these kings. Are there going to be dwarves? Are there going to be blue wizards? But the thing, we don't have any, we're not bringing, well, who are they casting as Aragorn? Who are they going to cast as Eowyn? Who are they going to cast as Elrond? That we don't have any of those touch points really to go to in this casting conversation or in the stories that we would expect. And so, it's just a big, wide open question mark. And Amazon has done an amazing job at keeping a lid on everything. So.
Well, yeah, and that's what I mean. It leads you to, it's amazing what they, but it also then it leads you start trying to maybe think about characters that could be around during some of this time frame, depending on how far they go. Like I look at like Peter Milan, and obviously having watched Westworld and seen some of that, and know the guy can act a little bit. Visually, he kind of looks like he could play, depending on where the show goes and how the show does things. He looks like he could be like an Elendil type character. He kind of looks like the actor that we briefly get a scene of in the prologue and Fellowship. And depending on how the series plays out time wise and how long he sticks around and how they do things, my mind immediately goes to he could be that type of character because he kind of looks like the guy from the movie. So you could kind of
that's right.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah, we don't know who they are. I am getting the red laser pointer in my eye from Comic-Con saying that we are out of time. We've got to wrap this up. But so I want to get final thoughts, and maybe let's start with Molly. There's a ton of great Tolkien stuff coming out this year and next year. It's gonna be huge. Where do you think Tolkien fandom Tolkien is going to be in the zeitgeist? Where would you like Tolkien fandom to kind of be in the zeitgeist? Do you want the Legendarium to dominate all pop culture and discourse, or do you like this idea of like having different stories in different venues?
I'm a fan of different stories. I definitely don't love the kind of like Marvel style like cinematic universe that's so big and so all encompassing. So it is kind of funny as someone who's loved this book for so long and like to have lived through to be like, now this is the second kind of wave of it being popular again. I do think like I've been engaging really intensely with like, especially the like younger queer side of the fandom. And there's so many people with really interesting ideas. So I just hope that, I think there's like a lot of really amazing people who are still kind of discovering these stories for the first time and finding themselves in them. And so I kind of hope that like the new stuff that comes out acknowledges us as well. I also really just hope that we get some like content for slightly younger people because I love making media for children. And I think like Lord of the Rings is technically not a children's book, but a lot of people read it when we're children. And I think it would be really cool to make something that felt a little bit more on the whimsical Hobbit side of the Legendarium rather than just these like really dark stories from the appendices. So
I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you on that. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that I'm the person to do it, but I'm like,
I think there might be an interesting problem that Amazon Studios is trying to work around with presenting, 3 seasons of a TV show, a very expensive TV show, with potentially no hobbits at all in it. So that's another major question mark that we're all wondering about. What type of writings are they going to use from Tolkien to justify that they might have some early hobbits that have not yet migrated over the Misty Mountains? What are they going to do in this story without that charm, that local charm of hobbits?
It's an interesting story because it just is so big and people really bring so much to it. And there's people who love things about it that pass in and out of my mind because I don't really care about it. And like vice versa with me to them. And so I think, I'm seeing a lot of like the really epic fantasy happening. And for me, I always love this like humble charm of the Hobbit protagonists. And so for me to get really excited about something coming out, it would have to like sort of capture that feeling of like the simple small guy contrasted in this like huge world of epic happenings.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Josh, you seem like the right age for what's coming out. I mean, these are all adult stories for adult fans. Yeah, are you excited?
Well, like I said, I'm excited about the show and the books that are coming out, but specifically with the show, I think where I'm at is, like I said, I once I get more information, like who's playing certain parts, my excitement level can start moving up further and further because then I can start picturing who's doing what, who, you know, and picture these actors and actresses in parts with what material is out there, even though it is limited, you know, and I can kind of start going there. I'm excited for more Middle Earth. I mean, it's always great to get more, especially if it's done in a way that's respectful of where people are at and where people feel about the material. But I just need more information. I want to see where it's going, because I love this stuff so much. So give me more information, more specifics, and then I can start to kind of ratchet it up a little bit, because they've got a great looking cast there. And I just want to know who they're playing. Who are you that I can invest my care and my love into who you are as an actor and an actress in something that I care deeply about. So I'm like here, but I want to get to here. I need
Jim, final thoughts. For fans that none of these projects that have been announced that are coming up, none of them were actually authored by Tolkien. This is all new territory of expanding the legendarium. Final thoughts on what do you want to say to those fans that say none of this is Tolkien?
I love the idea, if we're true to the spirit, of first introducing more and more the next generation of fans to the beauty and the power of the stories that happen in Middle Earth. And if we can stay true to that spirit and tell stories, I think it'll be great. At the same time, it's dangerous territory. We've seen it before. Mm-hmm. As we go into speculation, then the potential for fracture becomes higher. You know, when Game of Thrones started speculating beyond what was written, or when the Star Wars fandom breaks apart because people feel like the spirit of the prequels or the subsequent ones wasn't the same as the first one. I really want to avoid that with the Tolkien fandom, which has been always, I think, so thoughtful and so unified in its diversity, and I love that. So when I look at these new upcoming projects, and somebody says, "Well, let's have Merry and Pippin solve crimes in the Shire," well, that sounds wonderful, but candidly, you know, I'd kind of like to go back to Guillermo del Toro and say, "Hey, why don't you remake The Hobbit?" I'm okay with somebody going back and putting their own vision into things that we may have seen before, but from a completely different angle.
So the Shire, where we need the story to be told. Sorry, this is the drum I will beat forever. I want to see the scouring of the Shire on screen so badly.
So yeah, there's lots of opportunities for us Bombadil fans to hold it. So yeah, I wouldn't mind going back.
Well said.
Well, you heard it here. If Amazon, Warner Brothers, if any of you rights holders are watching, we just told you what the fans want and what we're excited about, and this is going to be just an interview. And I just want to say to all those that are making new Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth stuff unofficially on Tumblr and Twitter, keep creating, and officially on TV and film, keep doing right by Tolkien. And you know, this whole pandemic has been such a stress on everybody, and it's so wonderful to see that Lord of the Rings has helped everybody get through the pandemic. The millions of tweets that we've seen of people watching Lord of the Rings every single month, rereading the books, and now all of this creative energy, whether it's Roy Tolkien novelizing his relationship with his brother, you know, new books from J.R.R. Tolkien, and then these new projects that were put into the development during this trying time. I mean, that's the power of Tolkien to get us through the hardest times of humanity. And that's all we can hope for these movies and these TV series, is to reflect the best of humanity. And I hope some of the energy that was brought to this panel today by Cliff, Jim, Molly, and Josh can be translated into some actionable items at the studio level. You know, don't forget the youth and the next generation of fans as you're creating all of these wonderful things. This is the OneRing.net. We've been around for 20 years. We hope to be around more years. We're going to cover everything from all of these different aspects of Tolkien fandom. There's more games, there's more board games, there's video games, collectibles. There's so much more that we didn't even have time to get into, but we will cover all of them at theonering.net. So follow us on all the socials. Just search for The One Ring Net on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, and of course the main website, theonering.net. I'm your MC for today, Justin. Thank you, San Diego Comic-Con, for keeping the flame alive, and hopefully we will see you in person next year at a big Lord of the Rings experience. Amazon, you're watching. I know you are. We'll see ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.